start a new topic, that is the advanced grammar. This is not actually a topic, but this is a new bifurcation in grammar. Till now, since ever we have started this topic, we have been doing basic grammar. Now, the advanced grammar, people are very curious to know about advanced grammar, the simple ways of learning these advanced grammar. And with this, they even wanted to construct a new cream sentences, for which you would have to learn the advanced grammar altogether. Now, the advanced grammar, before we could actually move into the advanced grammar portion, we would have to learn the 5 different types of sentences bifurcation. Now, let us start with the first sort, that is affirmative sentence. The affirmative sentence are all those positive sentences we communicate, or we talk, or we say if in case we are trying to include that into conversation. So all those positive sentences are your affirmative sentences. Second comes is your negative sentence. The sentences where you're trying to input not, prefix un, conjunction neither. All these sort of sentences are negative sentences. In affirmative sentence, if in case I wanted to input an example of I am doing my work. So if in case this is my example of I am doing my work. And in negative sentences, if I'm trying to put not in a sentence before a verb, and I example that sentence like I am not doing my work. So not is your negative sentence and I am doing my work is affirmative sentence. Now let's move to the next part of sentences, assertive. Assertive sentences are those sort of sentences where you try to put assertion. Assertion is your statement. Say if in case while reading newspapers, you could even come across a statement of any recognized leader. And any recognized leader, if says that I am privileged to announce that in front of my entire country that I will be there always available for you for whatever consequence or circumstance we come across. So this is a statement given by a leader. So this is an assertion. So all these sort of sentences that you try to give any sort of statements is your assertive sentence. So let's keep it this way. These statements are your assertive sentences. Now let's move to the fourth portion, that is your interrogative sentence. Let us talk about the fourth bifurcation of sentences, that is interrogative sentences. You just need to remember that there is a question mark in this question. Here the questions are framed from where, what, why, who, how, which, whom. So all these words starting a question with a notion of interrogative is your interrogative sentences, like where are you going, what are you doing, how are you doing, how have you been, what have you been doing. All these sentences frame a question which in case we give it away like an interrogative sentences. Now these are moreover an interrogative questions and less a sentence. Now let's talk about the fifth bifurcation, that is imperative sentences. In imperative sentence, you would always show order, suggestion, and advice, or you try to show any sort of feeling in case of like order, or in case of advice that you would want to share. Say if in case if I would want to put that in an example, I would say consult a doctor, which is an advice. If I wanted to give an order to my junior, I would say shut the door, keep silence, maintain silence. So all these things are sort of order and sort of command that you give. Now all these sort of sentences are your imperative sentences. So we have now bifurcated sentences into 5 different components, like Affirmative, that those are your positive sentences. Negative is your negative sentences. Third comes your sentences that are assertive. You kind of show statements in that. Fourth comes your interrogative. You put a question mark to your questions. Fifth and the last is your imperative sentences. These are five major components. Now, lesser, we can even find two minor components. Those are exclamation or your exclamatory sentences, and the next is optative. Now, the two major difference between the exclamatory sentences and optative is both the sentences have different sort of feeling or the different sort of uh, chop that you make in these sentences, where in case if you try to put an exclamatory mark in midst of a sentence, that is an exclamation, and you put at the end of the sentence is your optative sentence. So if in case even in prior I had given you an example of what she died, so we are trying to put an exclamatory mark in midst of a sentence, and whereas if you are trying to construct an entire sentence and put an exclamatory mark at the end of the sentence is your optative sentence. So what does this indicate? This indicates that you are trying to put a feeling in between and put a feeling at the last. Like you are trying to show feeling in the entire sentence is your optative sentence. So with this, we are done with the major components of sentence bifurcation and minor components of sentences bifurcation. Now let's move to the important topic of advanced grammar now, for which we can actually better understand the topics. Now, if we are talking about advanced grammar, the first thing that just pinch into our mind is we would always have been doing time in tenses, that when we have done, when had we done this thing, or when are we going to do this thing, are we doing this now, or we are going to do this in later future or nearer past. So time and tenses can only be divided into three major portions. So if we talk about tenses, first is your present tense, the activity that you do now. Now, earlier we have studied about the auxiliary verbs, which actually implies in this tenses portion. The present tense would involve the present notion, which is am, is, and are. I am doing, she is doing, or he is doing, and the third one is we are doing. All these notions are in present tense. The second division of tense is past. The things that are already done, or things that we have been doing since, or the things that have been concluded from past, are the tenses divided in past notion. Now once we are talking about past tense, the past tense is something to do with was and were. To be form of was and were applies here. Or you can say that models that we can actually use is we might have done this, we might have been doing this since. So these all words are the words that could actually explain you that you have done certain things in past, or you have been doing those things from past till present. So all these notions comes under the boundaries or the jurisdiction of past. Now let's come to the tenses future. Now future is things that we wanted to do or we will be doing. So things like will or shall, would, all these modal verbs are included here in future tense. Because why we use this all words is because we are not sure that either we'll be doing or we are confirmed that we'll be doing this. So we will model is a modal verb where in case you put a surety, and would is like we are unsure that or lesser possibility of doing things in future or in a nearer future. So all these sentences which we try to frame in time and tenses, in present form, in past form, or in future form, has also certain bifurcations beneath. Now let's talk about present tense at first. We have four major bifurcations in present tense: is simple present tense, Then comes your present perfect tense. Then comes your present continuous. Your all sort of ing forms implies in your continuous tense, and last comes your combination of or compound of perfect plus continuous. So the four major bifurcation that we did in present tense is same applied with past and same applies with future. Now why does that happen? Because we are trying to even construct a simple sentence. We can even construct a form of continuous, like we put ing, like I am doing my work. So which in case I can even frame a sentence of I have done this work or I will be doing this work in near future. So ing form is very essential because that enables you to actually try and put or insert an ing form of continuous tense, like you're doing things, like you're working on things, like you are implementing things. So which is like a base of your time and tense altogether. Now let's talk about past tense. Now once we talk about past tense, is like all these four major components also applies in past tense, that's for sure. Now once we apply this simple past tense or present perfect, like past perfect, I'm sorry, it's past perfect or past continuous, or even we talk about past perfect continuous tense, we sort of implement all those five forms of verb that we have spoken about, like all the forms, five forms of verb of ed, applying es, like in the suffix es, s or ies, would actually ensure us that we are actually working on past tense. So there are certain sort of rules in this past tense also. We would even have to look into the depth of past tense. But before we look into the depth of past tense, we would have to understand what is future tense now. Now, when we talk about future tense, all the sort of modal verbs that we have done, like will, would, shall, should, may, might, all these things are actually applied in future tense, because these modal verbs that we are talking about, they have got something to do with surety, possibility, the probability, the surety that you give to your sentences. All these modal verbs are included in future tenses, and some or more are even included in past tenses also. Now when we talk about past tense, that can be a work done, or you have been doing that work, or you have started that work and you have already ended that work. So these all are things is where you try to put ed form, that is included in your five forms of verb. So once we talk about that ed form, once we talk about ses or ies form, or we talk about past participle, the adjective, the pressure, the emphasis that we are trying to make in that sentences is actually your time and tense we are talking about, which is the most important part in the module of spoken English that we come across. Now, while we are talking about time and tenses can even be your simple sentences, can be your compound sentences, or can be your complex sentence. It depends on the nature of sentences that you try and construct. For this, jumping into advanced grammar, I assure you that you guys would have to actually understand what is the basic grammar all about. Because once you try and join the parts of speech in a sentence, or you try to develop that paragraph, or you try to develop that speech, you would require all those components of parts of speech that we have already done. Now, when we are talking about time and tenses, it's always about present, past, and future. Present is now, past you have already done, future is about to come. You always need to understand all these 3 points. Now, once we talk about present tense, the doing thing, the present notion, the things that you are doing right now, or the things you are able to do, in a mode to do, in a nature to do, is all your present things. Now when we talk about past is what you have already done. Past is what you have already been doing since. Past is something that you have already started. Past is something where you try to use words like or prepositions like since, while, doing, during. And future is something where you try to implement all the modal verbs that we have done now. Now, when we are talking about more about modal verbs or we are talking about auxiliary verbs, we come somewhere near to time and tenses. I've already given you an example of I might go to London or I may go to London. There is a notion of doing things or visiting places in nearer future. Your sentences can always be in a present form, can always be in a past form, or can always be in a future form. That depends on when, how, what, when you try to implement these questions in your time and tenses. Sort of your interrogative sentences. You can even frame sentences in an affirmative form. You can even frame a past sentence in a negative form or in an interrogative question form or in an imperative form relating to that in a future, adding that to a future. So it's not something about that you just try to put a simple sentence or a compound sentence with an affirmation or assertion, but it's more about implementing or following all those sentences policy that we try to implement in grammar, because these are all essential components of grammar. So tenses is always about present tense, past tense, or near future tense, with four major components applying with present, past, and future all together. And the most important thing of tense is doing of an activity in three different notions. Now, let's move to a new topic, that is narration. I or you guys would always understand that we come with a sentence, we narrate that sentence one-on-one conversation or for some other person's conversation or a group of person that is not present there. Because we have done with time and tenses, we can easily jump on to direct and indirect narrations. Narrations has got to do with direct narration. Direct narrations is always about first person indicating that directly to a second person, and the other part is indirect narrations. Now, what is indirect narration? Please minutely understand this topic is because when first person is talking about third person and he is not talking directly about third person to third persons, but he is involving second person and talking about third person. So there is a triangle of narration of sentences from first person and third person, wherein a mediator is involved or a person, an uncommon person is involved in midst of a sentence or in the midst of a conversation, wherein indirect conversation and indirect conversation is applied. So indirect conversation, you can put it in an easy words like indirect conversation is a type of conversation where you don't conversation to the third person, is conversating about third person and not in front of third person. Simple. Now you can put a sentence like I said, and in double inverted commas, I said those were the precious days of my life. Now this statement, this assertion that I have actually presented, that those were the best days of my life, is in double inverted commas. I can conjoin these sentences by putting that. I can conjoin these sentences by putting assertion and making it a simple sentence like direct conversation on one-on-one conversation. I told you that those were the best days of my life. So you can even put on interrogation, that put on interrogative sentences like putting question marks into sentences and starting sentences with I asked, putting an assertion, I said, I told, and I claimed, or things like you can whatever adjoins or conjoin sentences, two sentences into singular sentences, whether be an interrogation, whether be an assertion, whether be a claiming of sentences, whether be putting a surety in sentences, any indirect sentences or direct sentences swapping with each other needs a conjoining of sentences, either that be a punctuation mark or that be a conjoining word, is your direct and indirect narrations. Now let's move to a new topic, which is active and passive voice. Now, once we talk about active and passive voice, the first notion that comes into our mind is active is something really like proactively you do, and passive is like lazily you enlarge that sentence. Now, active voice is something that you direct say something in a short claiming of words, like arranging of sentences or arranging of words in a sentence wherein you end the conversation short and precise. Now, passive is that sort of lazy voice that you put is you uh, join that words or you link that words in a sentences and enlarge that sentence, the same sort of active sentence, by using a preposition by using a preposition to, by linking two nouns in a sentence, is your active transformation from active to passive voice and vice versa. Now, when we try to actually transform the sentences from active to passive, we try to use conjunctions like or prepositions like by, prepositions like to, by me, to me, and enlarging that sentences from active to passive voice. This plays a very important role in competitive examinations because this is a major topic wherein do as directed, fill in the following blanks, or rearrangement of sentences can only be possible where they can actually put the active and passive voice as a grammar topic, and you need to actually transform or swap the words here and there and rearrange the sentences from active to passive voice. The main gist of this sentence I told you is about transforming the sentences from active to passive voice can only be possible if you conjoin or use prepositional words like by or to. Now, there is something very huge theory in active and passive voice. We will not be going to the depth of that active and passive voice because that requires full-on effort for you to actually understand a simple sentence, a compound sentence, and a complex sentence, and then swapping that words into prepositional conjoining or conjunctional conjoining words. All you need to understand is all you need to understand is transforming from active sentences to a passive sentences or a lazy sentence is a conjoining or a like you can even join or link those two words or two sentences, make them a lazy sentences by adding by with to in a single sentence. Now, once we are done with active and passive voice, there is some sort of essential grammar required in terms of vocabulary in competitive examinations. The vocabulary would include your homonyms, homophones, that would even include your synonyms, your antonyms. Synonyms is your similar meanings, antonyms is your opposite meanings. Homonyms has the same sound or phonetics or same sort of pronunciation but different meanings. If in case I'm talking about admit and admit, the same admit can be used in two different sentences with two different meanings as homonyms. Say if in case I wanted to use in a single sentence of admit, these have two similar sounds, admit and admit. Admit is one is you get admit in hospital, and the other admit is that I admit my mistake. I admit that this is my mistake. So accepting and getting admitted to are two different meanings used in two different sentences but same sound is your homonym. Now there are different types of homonyms with two different sort of sounds but used as a homophone and with a different meanings. Say if in case I talk about amiable and amicable, there is some sort of mixture of sound in this sentence but they have different meanings. different spellings. Amiable is lovely and amicable is friendly. We have a friendly relation or friendly relations with different nations in our boundaries. Like we have friendly relations with Nepal, so I can say we have amicable relations with Nepal. Once I try and pick that word amiable and try to use that, input that in a sentence, that you have an amiable performance. So amiable would be lovely performance. So there is a sort of, or there is a minute glitch that is inculcating in homophone, a sort of sound that is similar of those two words that uh, I used prior to this is admit and amiable, amicable. These were your homophones and homonyms. Now let's come to synonym. Synonyms is simply the same sort of meaning, the same sort of word which has a similar meaning to the word that is given. Samanarthi in case of Hindi, and antonyms is your Virodharthi, has a different meaning altogether. Now, these were one word, you can say one word vocabulary. Now, if you would want to stretch it to a phrase or uh, multiple words in a vocabulary, that comes to a one word substitution, like a 3 or 4 word phrase can be given, and you would have to uh, actually tell that, or you can even conjoin that word into your brain and give them a single bifurcated word. Say if in case I'm talking about an example of one large book, one large man is a brave man. So there is like one word substitution of uh, an entire phrase or an entire sentence. There is one word that is eligible to fit for that entire phrase, so which is called one word substitution. Now, after one word substitution, there are idiom and phrases also. Idiom and phrases is like a phrase which has a meaning and which you can even put in a sentences also. Idiom and phrases are your muhavre. Muhavre in Hindi. You can give a similar meaning, or you can give a similar notion. You can make us understand that what does that phrase actually means, and what does that phrase wanted to tell us. So there are certain sort of differentiation of words, differentiation of meanings, differentiation of sounds, the names, the phones, the differentiation of vocabulary altogether in terms of homonyms, homographs, synonyms, antonyms, one word substitution, idioms, and phrases, which are these days very essential for competitive examinations. Students preparing for Central Armed Police Force, students preparing for civil services conducted by Union Public Service Commission has a compulsory English subject more than that of 200 marks. Students that are preparing for Staff Selection Commission combined graduate level examinations for tier 1, tier 2 has compulsory English exam, like English paper involved. Students that are preparing for CDS combined defense services also has English inserted in syllabus. And students that are preparing for bank examination, like bank as in for probationary officers and for clerical posts, students that are preparing for any sort of force examinations also have compulsory English subject involved. So we can understand the importance of English in our daily life. If we are looking for any government job, not only if we are talking about government jobs, even if we talk about private firms and private jobs, even they are looking for a good conversation skills. They are even looking for good writing skills, so that they could actually draft an application, letter writing, sentence writing, or any sort of presses writing, report drafting, and so on. So there are many things that are involved in our daily life, but English being a very different, English being a very innovative, English being a very like clarification of your thoughts, using cream language and trying to explain your stuff very easily, which is why English is very important these days. So the importance of English in today's life, we all know that, and we all are practicing English in a like clear language. It's not necessary that we try to unnecessarily put vocabulary inside any conversation. We can even explain things in simple words, in simple sentences, or in compound sentences. It's not at all necessary to keep on putting any complex sentences or constructing any complex sentences. What is important is clarification of your ideas with proper grammatical topics, and not keeping inside any grammatical errors, using proper sort of prepositions, which is most important. And if you're trying to conjoin a sentence, please ensure that you use a proper conjunction in that case. Now, we are done with reading component, we are done with writing component, we are done with spoken component. Last and major component is listening. Now I'm trying to deliver a speech about basic grammar and advanced grammar, and some sort of introduction at the beginning and a closure at the end. The entire conversation that I had come across, I believe that there might be certain things that you guys would have not understood properly. There are certain topics that you would have missed out, just because in case that someone is not comfortable with the rate of speech, or someone is not comfortable with the proper English, or is not gripping that English. Some are less known to basics English, some are not comfortable with advanced English, some are even not comfortable with English fundamentals. What requires English to grip on is your strong basics. Once you clear all the parts of speech and try to inculcate them into those topics into a single sentence or into parts of speech, I bet you guys would actually understand the advanced portion of English as well. Basics is always something you take it from the necessary criteria of understanding, and advance is something you would require a practice and practice to actually understand. It's not necessary that you just put on unnecessary vocabulary in a sentence. It's moreover what requires in a sentence is a proper grammar. Do not try to put any sort of plural forms joining with singular forms. Say if in case I requires, the word subject I requires a singular form, and he and she requires a does form into do form of verb. So you cannot put he do his work. You would always have to prove out to manage that plural form with the subject he, the pronoun he. You would always have to use he does his work. You cannot say that, you can never say that he do his work, because I is a singular form, and whereas do is also a singular form of verb. So arrangement of that proper sentences, or arrangement of that proper words in a sentence, makes you develop your English from the root, from the very basics, and from, like, say, from the very beginning of your English. What you guys always wanted to do is, you wanted to just try to arrange the sentences. What requires the arrangement of sentences is your parts of speech. Once you're done the practical and the theoretical part of parts of speech, you can actually try and manage sentences into a single sentence, try to manage words in a single sentence, and you can follow the procedure of alphabets transforming into words, words transforming into sentences, sentences transforming into paragraphs, paragraphs transforming into the entire composition. The essay writing is also very essential for all competitive examinations. Why is it important? Because that would actually, the examiner would actually understand the knowledge of language, the knowledge of expressing things out, the exclamation that we have already gone through. So in short, if I wanted to say something in basic grammar or in advanced grammar, I would say that the base of the entire grammar is your parts of speech. If you can construct sentences in proper format of parts of speech, I bet you can even speak, you can even talk, you can even conversate, you can even understand So we are done with three components, and the remaining last component is your listening. You can only develop listening by ensuring that you watch Hollywood movies rather than going for Bollywood movies. Second is your listening to videos, the conversation of people or person that are using profane or like you can even say that you filtered English, those who are trying to use the filtered English, and you can even go with the persons, or you can even go with the conversation of a one-on-one conversation of shows that are held in India using British English. It's not always about people who can speak English are using perfect English. They can even commit grammatical errors. What is more important is that arrangement of parts of speech is what is the the foremost criteria, the first and foremost criteria. The arrangement of sentences, think before you speak. Second thing is what you need to understand is just develop that sort of arrangement of sentences in your mind. If you are a good listener is when you are a good speaker. So listen to what others say. Just try to see what words they are trying to inculcate in sentence or trying to input that in a sentence. Once they are trying to input a right choice of words is when you can inculcate those words in your sentences and keep that sentences, frame that sentences, transform that sentences, construct them with a good vocabulary, and then present a sentence. So with this, we are done with basics grammar. We are done with advanced grammar. We are done with the proper usages of sentences, how to speak, when to speak, what not to talk, what not to speak, what things should be avoided in conversation, what things to be taken care of, why is English so necessary for examination, why is it the best mode of communication in the entire world, why English being the best part of using a cream language. Now, once we are done with English, I bet you guys could actually understand and you can even use these sentences, try to construct your sentences by your own, and wherever you can grab the actual vocabulary from, you can just take a dictionary, find out that meaning, and use those vocabulary in a proper sort of sentences. It will take time. You cannot just learn English in just 3 or 4 months. Whoever says that can teach you English in 3 or 4 months is just buying your time or buying you money. And whoever says that he would try and use that practical sort of English in your daily life can be only possible if you try and be very participative in group discussions. You try and participate yourself in English uh, conversations, and just tell your friends that whosoever knows proper English, just tell your friends that I will try and communicate and conversate with you in English. And if I commit any sort of mistake, whether that be in grammatical or whether that be in portions of vocabulary, please ask them to correct you. And if not, just go for a right institute for your grooming and your practical conversation, who can actually enable your basic grammar is cleared with a practical sessions parallelly, and usage of that words and sentences in a proper time is what is important. With this, I'm done with my second part of advanced grammar. I hope you guys enjoy this video, and once you are done with this entire video, I bet you guys would actually get a right direction of choosing English as your first or primary language, and your mode of communication as an English would always be to the best of its level. And I hope you guys all the best for your future exam. Like if in case you're going for any sort of competitive examination or any private job firm, I hope you guys would implement what I suggested you, and good luck for your future. Thank you.